Today we're going to be looking at King Ahab. He's found in 1 Kings 16 to 22 and 2 Chronicles chapter 18. Now, the start of the reign of Ahab doesn't exactly start out smooth or good or godly. As we read in 1 Kings 16 verses 29 to 34, the author of Kings states, "In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him. And as it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. In the days of Hiel of Bethel, built Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of Avriam, his firstborn, and set up gates at the cost of his youngest son, Seguv, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun." So here we have Ahab. He's the son of Omri, the previous king of Israel. His reign lasted 22 years, so it was a longer reign than the reigns that we've seen up until now. He's described as doing more evil than any of the kings before him. And he foolishly chooses a pagan woman to be his wife Jezebel, which really is his downfall. Kings were not to marry foreign women because these foreign women would lead them away from the Lord and into idolatry. And Ahab should have learned this from the life of Solomon. We read this in 1 Kings 11 verse 3, that these foreign women led him away from the Lord. But Ahab just didn't start there. He built an altar for Baal. He built an Asherah for pagan worship. And he did more to provoke the Lord to anger than any of the kings before him. And he foolishly rebuilt the city of Jericho. And the judgment that came upon him is prophesied about in Joshua 6:26. Ahab has entered into extreme rebellion against the Lord. And he's confronted by the prophet Elijah in chapter 18, verses 17 to 18. And Ahab is very bold to speak out against Elijah here. Hear what the author of Kings says. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" And he answered, that's Elijah, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, in your father's house, because you've abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed Baals." And in 1 Kings 18, verses 20 to 40, Ahab gathers the prophets of Baal by the request of Elijah, and actually they are slaughtered by the instruction of Elijah. And Ahab tells his wife Jezebel what Elijah has done, and of course Jezebel seeks to kill Elijah, and then Elijah goes and meets God. In 1 Kings 20, we have the battles of Israel with Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, and the Lord is actually gracious with Ahab. In 20:13 to 25, the Lord defeats the Syrians. In 20 verse 26 to 34, the Lord defeats the Syrians again. The Lord does it by his power, and he shows grace to Ahab, and he's victorious over the Syrians. But in 1 Kings 21, we have a very wicked turn of events done by Ahab. We have the confiscation of Naboth's vineyard. Ahab covets the vineyard of Naboth because it's close to him, and Ahab is upset that Naboth will not sell him his vineyard. So Jezebel sets up a conspiracy to execute Naboth so Ahab can have Naboth's vineyard. Jezebel's conspiracy works. Naboth is executed on grounds of cursing God. And then Ahab does confiscate and get the vineyard of Naboth. But in 1 Kings 21, 17-23, Elijah confronts Ahab and pronounces judgment against Ahab. In 1 Kings 21:19, it says, Ahab will die in the same place where Naboth has died. And in verses 21-23 of 1 Kings 21, both Jezebel and the family of Ahab will be judged and punished. But in 1 Kings 21, 25-29, we really have the highlight of the life of Ahab. He actually humbles himself before the Lord. Let's read this passage. There was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord like Ahab, whom Jezebel his wife incited. He acted very abominably in going after idols, as the Amorites had done, whom the Lord had cast out before the people of Israel. And when Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth on his flesh, and fasted and lay in sackcloth and went about dejectedly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the disaster upon his house. Here we have Ahab hearing the judgment of God, and he humbles himself. He has sorrow for sin. He tears his clothes. He fasts. The Lord acknowledges in verse 28 of 1 Kings 21 that Ahab humbles himself. And the Lord relents from the judgment pronounced, and Ahab will not see this destruction in his days. Now in 2 Chronicles 18 and 1 Kings 22, we really have the end of the life of Ahab. We have the war of Ahab against the Syrians. Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, makes an alliance with Ahab to defeat the Assyrians. And there we have Ahab struck down by a fluke arrow, and he dies. And he dies in the same place where Naboth dies, and dogs lick his blood up. What's the application to the life of Ahab? First, we see the holiness of God. We see that the Lord does not take sin lightly. We see that the Lord punishes sin. We see that the Lord is too holy to look upon wickedness. And we see that the Lord fulfills his wrath by the murder of Ahab, and as well later on the death of Jezebel and the family of Ahab. Next, we see that God's words are true. The prophet's words that we see here are fulfilled in the judgment of Ahab and his death. And finally, we see the grace of God in this passage. In 1 Kings 21, verses 25-29, we see the grace of God shown to Ahab. Ahab humbles himself. He's sorrowful for his sin, and the Lord shows him grace. He receives grace. And this points us to the person and work of Christ. It also exposes our sin. We're sinners like Ahab, but the Lord shows grace to those who humble themselves and come before the Lord in humility. Jesus shows grace to sinners who humble themselves before him, and they will receive mercy and grace because Jesus Christ bore the judgment of God on the cross. He bore the curse of the law. He went forth as a sacrifice of propitiation. And he was that perfect and sinless sacrifice so that those who are humble before the Lord can receive the mercy of God. Thank you, Jesus, and thanks for watching, and God bless.